Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about the analyzing a primary source in its context with an example here. This is the Constitutional Order by Solon of Athens. This is one of the documents that's assigned, the primary sources that's assigned for Development 1.3. And so I just thought I would give you some pointers on analyzing a primary source in its context as you work on the primary source interpretation paper. So this is a poem by Solon of Athens. The first um, pointer here that it gives you on in the analyzing primary sources in their context document is that you want to get familiar with the historical circumstances. So with Solon of Athens, you can find this on page 40 of Western Civilization. Also, there's a little bit above the poem on the page where it's linked, right up here. Okay. Now, Athens was going through in the time before Solon's leadership, going through some real serious social problems. Um, and this was in the 600s and 500s BC. There was some serious social problems, people getting into large amounts of debt, being sold into slavery. These are Athenians themselves. And so that was a big problem. Solon came into office or came into leadership and was then able to issue some new laws, give debt relief, allow for those who were enslaved to become citizens. Um, in fact, had Athens, as it says on page 40 of Western Civilization, purchase the freedom of the slaves. Okay, so that's kind of a brief look at the historical context. You can read more about that. Now, you're also asked to then think about, all right, who's the author? Think about the context and analysis here. So, who produced the source? Well, this is a political leader, Solon, in Athens, um, somebody who has political leadership um, in the city. So, um, generally speaking, he's going to want to defend his policies, to say that he's done a good job. That's what political leaders usually say. They don't usually say, "Oh, done a terrible job," but the fact that he's a political leader and has made these changes, has tried to help the city put it on a better foundation. That's all reflected in the poem where he's talking about the city never being able to be destroyed by Zeus because Athena is protecting it, right? Um, the greed and arrogance of the rich are the things that can destroy the city. Injustice, as he would see it. Okay, all this can lead to civil war. He doesn't want that to happen. This is all influenced by the fact that he is a political leader trying to stabilize the city. Okay. His reforms have stabilized the city in his view, and he wants it to stay that way. For the type of document, this is a poem. Okay. Um, Ancient Greeks loved their poems and loved their poets. As far as I understand, these were a very popular form of, of literature in ancient Greek society, in these different city states. And so here we have somebody trying to communicate through poetry, which makes sense. Poetry in like the Iliad and the Odyssey by Homer, or legendarily by Homer. Um, the works of Hesiod were important, and indeed the introduction to the poems up here says that there was some influence by Homer and Hesiod in the poem. Okay, so that was important here, and you also get some poetic imagery. Some of you noted that in the Enkidu poem in the discussion. Well, you also see some poetic imagery here. Um, uh, Very dramatic language, vivid language. Uh, the shielding of Athena, the terrible spectacle of civil war, things like that. Okay. Now, we also have the audience and purpose. Who's supposed to? Well, it's to the citizens of Athens. Okay. They had certainly some expectations about poetry for it to be a um, interesting to listen to, all that kind of thing. It's hard to tell if he succeeds on that if we're not reading it in ancient Greek. But the author certainly wants to make an argument that the most important thing to keep Athens safe is to have a good arrangement, a balanced constitution, a good setup of government, okay, that doesn't allow greed and arrogance and strife to overtake the city, okay. And he's trying to convince the Athenians of that. He uses, um, he shows himself to be respectful of Athena, the guardian goddess, okay, of the city. He shows himself to be good in the sense that he wants justice, okay, and good balance and prosperity and stability in the city. Okay, he uses logic and facts and from history to show what he's doing, and also shows some very um, terrifying details about what a civil war would look like. Talking about wiping out the cherished youth. Okay, um, inexorable harm, vile slavery. All these kind of things stir up people's emotions as well as his appeals to their minds, and as well as his appeal to um, his building of their credibility his credibility, excuse me, by referring to Athena. Okay. Now the big picture. How does this all work here? Well, the big picture, we can think, first of all, the situation, the political situation, the social economic situation of recovering from strife and slavery and debt, the religious culture of the guardianship of Athena over Athens. All those certainly play a role in influencing how the poem was written, what was written. Okay, this is a a poem trying to justify Solon's reforms and encourage people to keep at it. Okay, and it's very much a poem for the polis, for the city state, that he wants to have it be a good and wholesome place and a stable place. And that's what Greeks generally seem to want. They wanted their cities to be good places. They often disagreed on what a good city would be. Okay, but those kind of things influence how the poem was written. Okay, at the same time, he's also trying to not only be influenced, but he's trying to influence as well. Right? Um, Solon not only is influenced by the events, he also tries to influence events by urging the Athenians to stick with his reforms, stick with the kind of balanced constitution he's created. Okay. At the end, he says, "This my soul commands me to teach the Athenians. A bad constitution brings civic turmoil, but a good one shows well ordering and coherence. As it puts shackles round wrongdoing, it smooths out the rough, it checks greed, it tempers hubris, and withers the fruits of reckless impulse. It takes crooked judgments and makes them straight, softens arrogant deeds, halts seditious acts, and ends the bile of grievous strife. And so under it, everything for mankind becomes whole and wise." And so he wants to influence the context too by encouraging Athenians to stick with it. Okay. There's other ways you could have analyzed the context here, but these are some ways that you could use those questions to try to analyze a primary source.